Welcome. You are at the CCC.
Where there are no outside issues. Hi, my name is Bonnie Violet. I'm a trans, femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist, and digital chaplain, also a person in recovery.
My name is Anthony. I'm a 7th-year doctoral student in clinical psych. I was almost late. Well, I was actually late to get here today, and I care about you.
Yes, and I'm Lulu, and my pronouns are he and him. I'm a former Miss Castro Country Club. I live in San Francisco. I'm in recovery. I'm in recovery for crystal meth and alcohol, and I am always in search of balance.
And each week we create and provide a brave space where we can talk about topics of recovery.
Yes, and our intention is to hold and inspire better spaces for those people in recovery.
By tackling topics sometimes used to separate us.
But before we do that, like, subscribe, and ding that bell. Ding, 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 ding.
That was smooth-ish.
It's
It
smooth.
was not. Where was my words today?
I know.
I was like, I only say this every week for a year and a half.
I know.
It's all good.
Oh my God, I barely made it.
But you did.
I
You
did
were
make it.
Okay, I guess we are really four-ish.
Do
I need to change the promos?
To 4-ish.
Like 403.
We can rely on our faithful listeners to not leave. They give us a grace period.
Yeah.
They give us like that 5, 10.
They say if you do like a random number, people are more likely to show up on time.
What do you mean?
So it was
like a
4:57
4:57?
or 4:12 instead of like 4 o'clock or 4:30.
I wonder what the psychology behind that is.
I don't know. I could just be making shit up.
I think
too.
you are.
No,
Yeah,
I'm not.
I
I heard
think
it
you are.
somewhere. I heard it somewhere. It might not be
You can't
like
believe- you can't
there might
believe
not be
every-
research on it, but
Yeah.
I did hear it.
You can't
somewhere.
believe everything you hear and then tell everyone about it.
Right.
Bonnie believes everything on the internet.
Plot
That's not
twist.
true.
She's with QAnon and she's
I have a little bit of discernment.
okay.
I can, think for myself a little bit.
I believe you can.
I think it makes sense though.
Why don't we start with how you're doing?
We're so giddy because you're here.
Yeah.
I'm giddy to be here.
You don't seem giddy to be here.
Girl, don't read me. I am pushing through.
It's okay.
Life is really life in me, but
I
I'm
know.
still trying to show up.
I know things have not been easy for you recently.
It's all good.
So why don't we start with how you're doing?
You just read me for Phil.
No, I didn't read you for filth. There was no filth.
There was Phil.
There was no filth.
Just a little.
And it begins.
It made me feel dirty.
And
I
it
felt
begins.
You
And
noticed that he came for you.
how did I come
like
for her?
gangbuster, and then
All I
he turned
said-
it around and said, "Oh, and now it begins. Now they're going to start bullying me."
Yeah.
Because I said you didn't look giddy.
Yeah, and then you're like, so how are you really?
Yeah.
Like, no, really, how are you?
Really? So
let's
how are
start
you
with
suffering
Let's
today?
start with you, Anthony.
We can. Do you want to start with me?
I think
We're asking you to start.
Okay. I'm good. Your
Great.
turn.
Okay, Lulu.
I'm really good at, but I do want to say, this past weekend, I got a chance for my alter ego to co-host Fall Follies. It's an event that happens through Western Roundup Living Sober. It's a conference that's being held in San Francisco, and it was a lot of fun. And that's it.
It was a lot of fun.
So I'm
It's
really,
a fun
I'm
show.
good. Yeah,
It was a
It's
lot
one of
fun.
my favorite drag memories was performing in that show a few years ago.
absolutely. You know what I love about it? Like normally there's the shows like Mascara usually has a theme.
Yeah.
And depending on who the host is, they're really rigid about the theme.
Mhm.
And I feel like with Fall Follies, the Spring Fling, you get to get to be a little more freer with your choices. Because when I'm hosting or when I'm organizing, when I'm curating the show, I am not really that. The theme that we come up with is so that I can my talking in between can glue this stuff together. But I want folks to feel like they can
Yeah, you were always really good at
bring
that.
their own thing too.
I just lost track of what you were saying.
because you weren't paying attention.
I was. I was
Wow.
captured by your hands. You know what I did like about Fall Follies this year is how many queens were like, "This is where it all started for me."
Yeah, no.
Oh, that was so magical. Because didn't MGM start at Fall Follies?
Yeah, we all said it.
Right. And
We agreed in the backstage that even if you started somewhere else, we started here. Okay,
Right.
wink, wink.
I love that. Yeah.
No, it's true. It's I used to say when I hosted Mascara, this is a hub for bad drag, but
Yeah, we know.
It started in this very
Living
room.
Sober is
Actually, yeah.
really a hub for bad
Yeah.
drag.
That's not fair. There were some really, really good acts, and there
Oh,
were some acts that were green.
Well, we all have to start at some point.
We do.
It's best to have cringy moments when you're with your family.
Man, and were there cringy moments at this last? I'm gonna just leave it there at this last Fall Follies. Whew.
Oh,
Okay.
There was okay.
No, but it's best that you leave it there.
Yeah. No, we're on
It's
air.
best that you leave it there.
Yeah. So
I'm bummed I missed it.
Man, I'm not doing that on air.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how are you?
I'm good. You were good. You were very good. I'm good. Good.
Yeah, I'm very good. Things are really good. Yeah, I've been on kind of like on cloud nine for like the last couple of weeks. It's been really amazing. Ever since I made that decision not to kind of rush through
School.
my dissertation.
There's something
portfolio.
magical about when you're in your whatever and then you make a decision. Like you
Yeah.
make a decision. It's like all of a sudden it's like, I can breathe.
Yeah. Well, I felt like I was like voluntarily making myself sick, and I was just like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And like the second I was kind to myself, everything opened up, and I'm like, oh, did I just like level up in my recovery or in my like self-care? It was really nice.
Cool. I'm glad to hear that it's been such a positive like experience for you.
You don't sound glad.
Jesus.
Just fucking with you.
I just can't today.
Fucking with you.
I can't today.
Check, please.
All right. So I need to comment that Brandon has popcorn in the room, and I'd really like some popcorn.
Yeah, because you need to make a bunch of noise
And on
eating while you
our ASMR. Shall we transition?
I was gonna say, yeah, you can't use that word. We talked about this.
Here we go.
Did we come up with a different word?
Shall we move on?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So today's topic is masculinity and all of its many forms. For those at home, there's a distinction that we make, at least in text. There's a distinction between sex and masculinity, which sometimes those things are overlapped unnecessarily. So today we'll be talking about traditional ideas of masculinity. I use traditional loosely, but basically anywhere where the word has been used to describe behavior, either in ourselves or in other people or in art or in music, that's what we're talking about today. And as usual, for folks listening at home, if you have any thoughts during our conversation, please chime in. We love when you say hi. We love when we get to hear what you're thinking. So where shall we begin?
Well, you were mentioning, when you were looking up definitions or whatever, kind of, I would start there. Talk about that.
Well, I know masculinity was one of those topics where we all were probably like, that's a great topic, but how do we talk about it? Or, I think it's for me, I think also as somebody who's trans femme, masculinity is something that I'm still like kind of battling with, and it's like, whether it has to do with my gender identity or it has to do with just my relationship with masculinity and the people in my life, the people that I might fuck, like whatever, and kind of understanding that. But when I was doing some looking to kind of see if I could, I don't know, sometimes I like to pre-game for the show and I'll watch a video or two, before we all get together. And I was like looking for masculinity on YouTube, and everything that came up was like alpha male. We gotta take masculinity back. Like we need men to be real men, or those sorts of things. So I was able to find some more mixed kind of bag stuff around like divine masculinity, and I even came across an interview with some trans men and some like conservative men talking about masculinity, which was quite interesting.
Yeah, the masculinity that you're describing, the kind of tough one, I remember, I think that's called hegemonic masculinity, the kind that's like really kind of man's man, like, which is so weird because there are all of these ideas that are associated with hegemonic masculinity when in fact those things are actually very kind of class-based, like if you're on the lower SES side, masculinity tends to look very blue collar, where if you're higher up on the SES scale, masculinity tends to be more white collar, and they're like associated behaviors.
Well, and I think the thing I didn't see, I think there's the masculinity that we all grew up with, like as all of us who kind of grew up, I don't know, I grew up as a man, I was raised as a man, but it was like this heteronormative kind of manhood or masculinity that didn't quite match mine. Like it never did, like as a trans person now, I can like, it maybe makes a little bit more sense now. I don't know if you all had that same experience, but I think, you know, masculinity for maybe queer men might be a little different than what it is for a straight man. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
In the, you know, the
Sure. In the bunny
stereotypical
ears
way.
sense.
the stereotypical kind of
Yeah.
expected
What
way.
I think is interesting about the word masculinity is that the origin mas, like the kind of translation is worthy of a male. It's just, which is very interesting. And the word femininity, I don't think it was even recorded until the 1300s. I think it was like Chaucer or something like that. So there's very like, so these ideas, I mentioned those things to say that like they're so kind of like slippery, you know, that there is nothing kind of concrete about what it means to be masculine or feminine. I was thinking too about like aggression, because aggression has generally been associated with masculinity, and how aggression in animals is 100% hormonal. And humans, aggression, or rather masculine traits, are not necessarily hormonal. I mean, there have been some associations with like aggression and like sexual drive to testosterone, etc. I forgot where I was going with all of that.
I was just thinking, like, because I'm just listening to you, y'all, and appreciating this. But when I thought about growing up, when I thought about masculinity, it wasn't so much about like traits or anything. It's about the things that I did. Like I played sports. I was the only boy in my family, so I had to clean the yard while the women cleaned the house. Things of that nature. So it's like I don't know.
Yeah, I also think like I learned a very particular type of masculinity growing up. I was born and raised in the projects, and the men in my family were kind of like men's men, except, you know, that looked different for us because, you know, some of the people in my family were selling drugs, and they were, you know, on the streets. And so that looked very different, right? Like it was a hood masculinity.
Yeah.
And that hood masculinity, for example, wouldn't wouldn't survive in, say, maybe like a corporate environment, right? Because masculinity is going to look very different, and that type of kind of like hood masculinity is politicized. You know, it has political like energy around it.
It's weird how. Okay, so this might take us off on a different tangent.
Here we
But
go.
it's that idea of masculinity that it's the differing in masculinity that would cause like someone who is maybe considered quote unquote lower class or white collar to challenge someone's idea of masculinity.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Meaning like, okay, so great. I'm a man. I'm not supposed to show emotion. I'm not supposed to be passionate about things. Or like, you have straight men who are dancers, and instantly somebody would dismiss them as not being masculine enough because they're not doing the things that you know the traditional things that are masculine. So
yeah, and you're reminding me too about how so much of that is informed by culture, right? Because like in the United States, to be a male ballet dancer, you're going to raise some eyebrows, but like if you're in Russia, you know, that has clout because they see the athleticism. I realize I'm treading on like dangerous water by like praising Russia in this way, but you know, but if you go to like, because people know of the Bolshoi ballet,
you're not doing that like a certain former president, so don't worry.
No, yeah. The form, like, you know, but what I'm saying is that there are that masculinity is informed by culture. And you know, and the other thing I think that is interesting is I think even in the United States now, there's the idea of masculinity is starting to shift a little bit, because there's this new idea of like the Sigma male. Have you ever heard of the Sigma male, like alpha male, Sigma male? So like the alpha male is kind of like aggressive and is about kind of advancing, et cetera, where the Sigma male kind of exists in a realm where they're considered equal with the alpha male, but they aren't kind of preoccupied with all of the other things because they're just doing their own thing. But I think I want to go back to Bonnie Violet's question. I think that as a gay man, masculinity is seen as, it has like a cultural cachet. There's like a culture, there's a currency, you know, there's a currency to masculinity. And it's interesting because, you know, my theory is that gender kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum, if we see them in that way, I do think it is performative. I do think that we learn how to be women, and we learn how to be men, and we learn how to kind of to be non-binary, right?
But
Mhm.
learned or forced into those roles.
Well, yeah, I mean, learned in like
But-
the exact, like the technical sense
Yeah,
of learn. Yeah,
yeah, no,
you know what I mean? Like we are conditioned to behave in certain ways, kind of growing up. Who was it? I think it was who was that? She was that philosopher. She said one is not born a woman, one is made a woman, or something like that. Oh man, Simone de Beauvoir. So that was her whole thing. Go.
We're all okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that.
We have a comment.
Oh, hey, Todd.
It's so Todd says it's so funny to watch the at-large gay male community perform the hegemonic standard of masculinity as the standard heir superior, aka no femmes. I'm also curious about your thoughts around the performance of masculinity and its relationship to power. Also, hi mom. That's my drag child.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
I have an answer to this if y'all
Yeah,
don't want to
please
jump
do.
on it. So, there was like the last part. I'm also thoughts about
The high mom
Oh,
part.
so what's interesting? So in the research that I've been doing recently on same-sex intimate partner violence, one of the precursors to violence in male same-sex relationship is are issues with masculinity. It's like an insecurity around gender, and I think that the way it manifests is in aggression.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's almost as though like the performance of masculinity is being used to kind of like prove like I am a man, and then that's stemming from from shame.
Right.
Well,
But it's like, but I think, when we're not raised to see ourselves in the families that we have, like most
Right.
of us had like a mother and father in some form or the other. And we
Right.
we learned what a man is and does through our father
Yeah.
and what our mother is and does through our mom, so to speak. Right. And I remember when I first, I ended up kind of landing in that gay box because I was able to be a feminine man and be okay. Like I could actually express my femininity, even though it was still, was still frowned upon in a lot of ways. It was a little bit more safer place to play with my femininity than say as a straight man. Right. And so, but we don't know what it means to be like a queer man or a gay man,
Yeah.
or
Right.
we just assume, like for me, I remember being really I was married to a man. And so it was like, part of the idea was like, okay, I'm gay. So just insert man where there's woman. And so then what, you have two men like my father, or does someone, they always say like, so who's the man, who's the woman,
Yeah.
sort of mentality. And so then you think of the receptive, you think of the submissive versus the dom versus,
Right.
it gets all.
Well, I was going to say
over.
first, it's important to note that we lost a generation of teachers through HIV and AIDS.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we are where we are because, maybe what we could have learned as a result of the support that we got. But I think that until we break free, until we get to a place where we break free from the roles that kind of are put in place that we're going to, this, what is it? It's the homophobe, how did it say? It's the
Internalized
internalized
homophobia.
homophobia.
Yeah.
We are going to be playing those roles. Like if you get into a relationship with a man and the only examples you have are the relationship between a man and a woman, of course it's
Right.
Of course, how are you not going? And then both parties are fighting to maybe fighting for that role regardless. Yeah.
I think one of the traps that we might have fallen in is this idea that something can't exist outside of masculinity and femininity, right? I think, right. And so, and I'm not even thinking about saying I'm non-binary, right? Because non-binary keeps those things in place. It still says there's a woman, there's masculine and feminine, there's a woman and there's a man.
Right.
And so, there can be something outside of that. I do think it's like a false polarity.
And not everything has to fall in between masculine.
Right. It doesn't. Right.
Yeah, but you have to do the work to get there because it's like if you don't think,
Well, you just have to let yourself exist where you are.
If you don't think of those terms.
Like that's the big
That's
thing,
the
is you
one-
just
yeah.
have to
Yeah.
let yourself exist the way you are. I was
Right.
listening to another thing when I was
Mhm.
pre-gaming, and they mentioned that
I'm sorry. Why does that pre-gaming
Just
sound
the-
like prelude?
it's one and the same.
Same.
But
She's prelude
we all
right
get
now.
off. We all get off on different things. But he was talking about, and he was this. You would probably know his name, but he's really big on talking about trauma and addiction.
Is it the
He's
Gabriel
Hungarian, I
Matat, the guy you sent us?
Yeah.
Yeah. He wrote this incredible book on addiction.
But
Anyway, go ahead.
he was talking about how the identity is really what's wrong with us. Like as soon as we take on an identity, we limit ourselves.
Oh yeah.
And then we keep ourselves from being who we really can be or what we're meant to be. You know, it's like, and that can happen even in the workplace. You know, it's like you go in and do what everyone else is doing at work, you're just going to get what everyone else is doing. But if you go in and do you, then you can begin to get different results, you know?
Yes. I'm still chewing on that. That's a profound statement.
Aspects. He said it much better than I did.
We have a comment coming in. What do you see as a solution for parents who are raising young men and trans men? A solution.
Well, and I think what I hear, I mean, I think masculinity has such a bad rap. Like this idea, like toxic masculinity is like kind of the only masculinity. And so, I mean, I think when it all comes down to it, I mean, you know, we all have masculine and feminine traits. And even like you said, traits outside of that. Right. And I think being able to help or let your child be who they, you know, want to be, let them explore, let them play. I think that was something I heard too, that, you know, we forgot how to play. Many of us didn't get to play because we have to perform being the cute kid or the one with the good grades or the whatever. And so like allowing, I think, your child, regardless of their gender, to kind of play around with how they express themselves, I think is a way to combat that toxic masculinity, or maybe even, you don't usually hear toxic femininity, but I would think there's probably, you know, some failings in that as well, you know?
Yeah. I think saying solution implies that there's a problem, and I feel like we haven't identified what the problem is.
Well, I think there are toxic men who are causing harm in the world. So how do I raise a child that is not a part of that?
I just had an idea. So I remember. So one of the things I've noticed is that a lot of, like, growing up, I was essentially raised by drag queens and butch lesbians.
Really? Yeah, that makes sense.
Because I was like super involved in the club scene, and so I had like a group of people that I chilled with. A lot of them were drag queens.
So you grew up in your 20s, not your.
As a teen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I used to hang out with all these drag queens and all these butch lesbians, and the lesbians, I noticed, took on these like toxic masculine traits.
Oh, absolutely.
And I thought this was interesting, right? Because if we agree that gender is learned, then there's something to be said for kind of character, or performing like a caricature of a man. But that's also
I think it's
tricky
hard.
language.
It's hard, and I don't know if this is something I've just been experiencing in my transition, but like it's really hard to discern, am I doing this for me or am I doing this for the people around me? And sometimes it's not even about like, I need your approval. It's like, I just don't want you to punch me in the face.
Yeah.
You know, or like, and it's really hard. Or it's like, I want to dress nice and I want to go out, but I don't want to deal with somebody trying to fuck me or catcall me or whatever. It's like, I just want to be pretty, or just go out and not, like, if I'm not done up, then somebody's like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
You know, like what's really wrong, you know?
Can I say back to the comment about like raising the solution? Like, obviously you're right. It's like, I think the solution, I think for parents who are raising trans kids, non-binary, whatever, I think the responsibility, or the thing that puts them on the right track, is for them to work on themselves. Like, I think that, like, until I decolonize my mind around certain things, I got to be open to it.
Yeah.
Should we take that comment? What was the comment that came in?
Was there?
Justin says, or writes, what do you see? No. There was one after that. Wasn't there one after that, Brandon? You're asleep at the wheel? So Don says, in my family, being masculine meant not showing emotion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it means that a lot.
Holding stuff in, and in cultures of brown and black cultures, holding stuff in created the mental illness and the depression and all this stuff.
It's one of the reasons why men die first.
Exactly. All and the alcoholism and all that stuff that we go through. And I just think
I think when I was a teenager, my friend and I, we did drag. We did like The Boy Is Mine. We like dressed up like Brandy and Monica. Anyway, I'm bringing that up because
Why have
I know. I'm like, oh,
I was a fucking teenager. I was like,
you haven't shared about this
we're
before.
good.
well,
Share
because
away.
that's interesting, and I'll speak to that in a second. But I bring that up because I was never more aware of masculinity than when I was in drag, because
Yep.
I had to perform being a woman, and I remember in my body thinking, well, what does that even feel like? You know?
Yeah.
Um,
That's what happens. That's what happens when a person first starts performing in drag.
yeah.
No matter, I always joke and say, but no matter how outwardly masculine or feminine you think you are, all of a sudden it's like I beefed it up because in whatever way I was like trying to make sure that people knew, like in my mind, I'm having, you know how you have that conversation. I'm trying to make sure that people knew that I was what I wanted them to know I was, or whatever. Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, to speak to that thing, I think one of the things that I'm learning to get comfortable with is my own femininity, right? Because that to me, if I'm keeping it 100, is terrifying. The idea of appearing feminine, or the idea of being kind of seen as like a stereotypical gay man, that's terrifying for me, because growing up, I had the shit beat out of me whenever I did anything that looked like effeminate, you know. And it didn't take much, you know. Like, well, the story I like to tell is, I remember when I was a kid, I picked up a French fry, and the fucking French fry was hot, so I did it like this. And so for folks at home that can't see, I did my pinky was raised because it was fucking hot. And my dad said, men don't eat French fries like that. And then he picked up the French fry and he showed me how to eat it. And I feel like the message that I got during that time was, that was the first time I think I had the message sent to me. It's not okay to be whatever it is that you are. Like, you have to change your behavior to make sure that, you know, it's satisfying other people's expectations.
Yeah.
That messaging is really fucked up, because even when they don't say it to you directly, even how they react around you, how they comment on things, how like, and I was thinking about that while you were saying that. It's like, it's not like I had my father or men in my life directly tell me outright, but I paid attention to them because I had them on the pedestal, and so obviously what they said was golden to me.
Yeah, I also think so. I think part of the I've been trying to do a lot of this work the last 2 years, right? Is like being comfortable with kind of relaxing a little bit, you know. And like I said, it's scary, right? Because one of the things I've seen, I mean, I'm not talented, I could never do drag. But one of the things that I've heard is that a lot of people who want to do drag are afraid of doing drag because they feel like it'll just desexualize them. Right. Like, I've heard that complaint a lot. Like, oh, once I did drag, like, guys were no longer interested in me.
I've heard people talk
I've
about
heard
that.
of that. Yeah.
That's a big thing. I'm sorry.
No.
I just get, okay. So in the Black community, like, there's been this conversation about the demasculization or whatever of black men or black actors. Let's start with black actors. When you put them in drag, like Medea and all that other stuff. And on the one end, it's like, I'm all whatever, because being someone who gets an address every now and then, it doesn't take away from who I am. I had a friend actually call me Gatsby, like, she said, Emma, what does that mean? Well, you're not too masculine or too feminine. I went, which is fine. It's perfect.
Right.
I think we're fortunate. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think this is something that it's crazy that we're even talking about it, because this conversation I've had mostly in private. And I just had a conversation with another guy in the rooms, and I don't know how we stumbled on this, but we were talking about how, one, for example, you're meeting up with a hookup. There is a bit of a performance there, you know? I only recently got comfortable with like using the word girl to refer to other gay men. And I've only recently got comfortable with like other men doing that to me. And I think part of like the comfort around that is people are going to think what they're going to think, you know. I can't. And I think I just feel much more comfortable if I'm allowed to just kind of relax. And I don't even know what that looks like. You know what I mean? I've never kind of seen myself as like, I've always seen myself as like nerdy as a gender. You know what I mean? I'm not a very cool guy, right? So like my gender, I feel like that's what I most associate with, is just kind of being a fucking square. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Is
and
there
the
a
silence
comment?
was, yeah.
Question?
All right. The question is, what's a model of empathy for folks who are perhaps able to recognize their original parental programming, but still struggle with adjusting to the changing norms around masculinity in a world that maybe isn't changing at the same rate, especially outside the Bay Area? I feel like this is a question from a test.
Yeah,
Is
and also thank you, Justin, for participating so
Yeah,
much. We love you.
I feel like if he almost feels like a plant.
I know. Well, Justin was a former sponsee of mine.
I'm sorry. What's a model of empathy? Well,
what we saw, right?
yeah, a model of empathy. Man, I can't think in public like this.
Still struggle with it.
Yeah, adjusting to changing norms.
Masculinity in a
Well,
world.
the rooms. I mean, it's like, I think that aren't we really patient with one another, because it's like we're stumbling through all of our experiences. And go ahead.
I figured it out. No, go ahead.
No. I
Or
was
you
just saying, it's like, if we're thinking of a model of empathy, like that's for me the one place. It's like,
Yeah.
because especially, okay, so we talk about this idea of finding our tribe, a group of people who are kind of trying to figure themselves out, and you're with people who are not judging you, or not who allow you to just be.
Yeah.
And that requires really kind of you doing the work and finding those people. But when you find people who release you to be as messy as you're going to be, so that you can get better, I mean, who don't hold you to unrealistic expectations, I don't know.
Yeah. I also think, like, what's interesting about the question is, well, one of the best things I ever heard was when I was working at the Rise Youth Center in Richmond. My clinical supervisor was this wonderful woman named Marissa Snooby. May she rest in peace. And one of the things she said to me was, Anthony, I need you to be more visible in the center, because these young boys need to see that masculinity can look in many different ways. And I understood that, because in the environment, it was more of a hood masculinity. And because I was there as a professional, I didn't have the space to kind of do the code switching, or I didn't feel comfortable. And I remember that was like one of the first times that I thought to myself, oh, like maybe I can, again, like lighten up a little bit. I also think that there's nothing more masculine than a man who gets into drag. And I think the reason why I have that opinion is because I think it takes an enormous amount of energy and self-awareness in order for a man to kind of like say, all right, like I'm going to do this very forbidden thing, this like socially forbidden thing.
So you're calling me really masculine?
No,
Well, and then but I think then that's also kind of playing in the idea that being masculine is being strong or brave, or
yeah. I mean,
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And
I hear what you're saying too.
I heard someone talk about the true attributes of being a masculinity as more like a peacock. It's more kind of showy and kind of.
And that can be I mean, I don't think. I think the problem. I think there are some things that are masculine. But I think we do kind of think of it as a bad thing. So what if, like, being masculine is about being powerful or whatever in a forceful way, or a more like physical way, so to speak? That doesn't take away from other types of strength that might be more whatever. I was listening to another person in pre-lubing or whatever for the show, and they were talking about the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and like in very general terms was this idea that the divine feminine was to like go with the flow, whereas like masculine was action, like to take action. You can debate that. You can
yeah. I was mostly listening.
I was listening because you wanted to say what.
No, because I didn't want to lose it. So what I was saying, so in the Bible, I think masculinity is defined as humble leadership. Just kind of throwing it. Yeah, that's what it. Yeah, that's what it. I meant. Yeah, that's what.
Did we miss it? Did we miss it somewhere? Then
humble leadership. There was something I wanted to say, but I know we're getting very close to time, and we have a comment. Justin. Okay. Oh, it's Jaylon.
Oh my God, I love it.
In most families, masculinity equates to not showing emotion. However, that lack of emotional intelligence is what plagues a lot of men. Even for myself, I struggle with what it actually is or means to be a man. And to be honest, what makes that more difficult is dealing with my own community who, quote unquote, joke and make homophobic and misogynistic remarks about identity and or appearance.
Yeah, I love this idea around emotional like intelligence and like the lack of emotions, like the men aren't allowed to have emotions. And I think one of the challenge, I mean, and like I wish I was more masculine in those ways. Like I wish I was able to not be overtaken by my emotions all the time. You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of like the push and pull of it is that, you know, there's pluses and minuses to both. And I think just getting stuck in one or the other is when it can maybe become toxic. Cause I can get so, and I don't know if it's the hormones or whatever, but I can get so in my emotions that I am fucked. Like I can't just, that's my problem today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I love it.
But you know, and it's like, and it's so interesting to kind of be like, you can be overrun by the emotions in the same way that, and the emotions can be a really great thing to have, but also they can be a detriment. I
have a theory that with respect to gay men, that I think for a lot of gay men, and this is just my opinion, for a lot of gay men, there's a fear of masculinity, either because we saw it in abusive fathers or there's a fear of embodying a thing that they've only seen as violent. And, you know, for example, I've been in situations where I remember when I was training with a private soccer coach, and I had developed this very intimate relationship with him. And I remember we were working on a drill and I had to defend against him, and I feared hurting him. I feared hurting him. And I remember saying to him, like, I can't do this with you because I'm afraid I'm going to hurt you. And I remember thinking like, that really fucked with my head, because I'm like, where did this come from? And what can I label this? And I love what you said a second ago about not getting caught up in the I guess the push and the pull between the two things. Because what I'm learning in my own kind of journey around this kind of stuff is that it isn't about being masculine or feminine, but it's about authenticity and however that shows up. And you know, my last story about this is like, I can remember when I was with my ex, there was a moment where I allowed myself to be vulnerable, and it wasn't received well, because I think the expectation was, you know, Anthony, you can't do this. There isn't room for both of us to be doing the thing that you're doing right now. And that kind of pushed me back. It made me think like, oh shit, like I don't have a partner that I can express my feelings to. I think I relate to that idea of having the fear of masculinity. And at first I always thought like, no, but I do have a very major fear of that toxic masculinity, but I also have had a very strong attraction and desire for masculinity and a certain type of masculinity, a masculinity like I grew up around in the rural Idaho. You know, like those were the kind of guys and the people that I really wanted to find myself around, because I wanted their acceptance. I wanted to not get the shit beat out of me by those types of men. Does that make sense? Yeah, we've talked about kind of the theory about brotherhood, like the idea that like I think gay men are in search of brotherhood, you know, and we go about it in ways that isn't always like the healthiest. And I'm walking on eggshells right now. Well, no, that was kind of that was kind of what we like when I first thought to talk about this masculinity conversation was a clip from Trevor Noah recently talking about kind of like how men were saying there wasn't enough sex, and basically it came down to the end was, is it that men aren't having enough sex, or is it that men aren't getting intimacy met elsewhere or in another way, you know? And so, and I know in my personal sex life, very many times, I think when I was searching for intimacy, I settled for like dick, you know what I mean? When that was really not what I wanted. And it just left me feeling empty and dissatisfied. And probably me thinking that sex was dissatisfying, right? When it might not actually be the sex, it's just the overall.
It's screwy how that works, because it's like when you go out wanting a cuddle, but you choose someone who doesn't want to cuddle or whatever, it can really damage you from all of that period. Like, because if you're thinking, no. Yeah, because we're, I feel like this is one of those topics where we need a part two. Yeah. We need to start wrapping up. I was thinking that we definitely need to have a conversation about, you know, we need to change the conversation, talk about the feminine part of it too.
Yeah, that was planned for next week.
That is planned for next week. I forgot where I was going to go with all of that. except to say that
You're going to tell us about a book or some
book.
fancy
Right.
person.
Drop it.
Simone de Beauvoir.
But parlance.
Right.
Simone that one fun fact about her, she was in a relationship with Sartre, and they were in an open relationship. So they were these like French philosophers.
Nice.
And were kind of
They were lovers. Huh?
yeah, they were lovers, and they were very open about being in an open relationship.
Mm.
That's the first time I'd ever heard of heterosexual people.
Well, if
doing
a philosopher can't do it, who can? Right?
Seriously.
Yeah.
Seriously. Should we start wrapping up? Do we have any kind of
Probably.
lingering thoughts? I have so many thoughts.
I
feel
know. It's like,
I've
so,
been
yeah.
in my head the whole time.
Yeah.
Let's continue this conversation.
This stirred up a lot for
next
me.
week. Yeah. Because when you first talked about it, I'm like, there's a
I
lot to
know.
talk about.
You were like,
And
really?
I might start crying.
Yeah. I know. I kind of want to
That
go
would be very
home.
masculine of you.
Yeah. I want to go home and like map out a structured conversation around it, because it just seems so rich, because we're talking about something that kind of exists like a ghost in space, but no one really names
Well, we're swimming in it constantly.
it. Yeah.
We have
I'm
our
sure
whole
you
life.
are
It's
swimming.
like in the
it
minutia
constantly.
of masculinity.
Not the
Right.
minutia.
The
The
minutia.
minutia.
So
Let's parlay.
if you want to, I know exactly. If you want to get in touch with the Lulu, you can always reach me on the gram at LouisLou86.
Why did you just say the Lulu?
because they wanted to.
Go.
And you can reach me, Bonnie Violet, at A Queer Chaplain on all of the things, or you can go to my website at aqueerchaplain.org.
And you can kind of reach me at @LucasCCC on Instagram. Or if you don't want to hit me up on Instagram, you can send us all an email at podcast@castrocountryclub.org. If you're feeling extra chatty, you can leave us a voicemail on our SpeakPipe. SpeakPipe.com @SpeakPipe.com/@the-CCC.
Yes, and the Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and a refuge for the LGBTQ plus recovery community.
They provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth.
Their vision is to reduce the suffering of addiction by connecting people to community, opportunity, and support. You can find more information at castrocountryclub.org.
And tune in every Tuesday at 4 p.m.-ish, especially when Anthony gets here on time,
Right.
when we go live on our Castro Country Club Facebook and YouTube channels.
Find us wherever you listen to podcasts at the CCC.
Hey, what Tuesday was that?
What Tuesday? Every
All
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. As usual, tell your friends about us, subscribe, like us, tell your enemies about us, tell anyone you know about us, and join us next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brandon, your turn.
That's your cue.
Yeah, seriously.